So without further ado, let me introduce John Rhadigan with Fox Sports, and he's going to introduce the panel. I told him I wish he would have brought Rick Renner with him, because on my bucket list, I want to see if that's really his hair or not. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Dr. Bautista, and howdy. Howdy. Nice to see you. I am so used to doing events where it's a bunch of stuffy, egotistical media people that I am thrilled to have students and fans, and so I want to have fun. This is just going to be a fun deal. We're going to ask questions. We'll leave time at the end for all of you to ask questions, and I'll ask some questions, and I'm not very good at this, so I'll forget a lot of questions, and then you'll ask them and pick up for me, and then by the end it'll look like it was a great deal, even though I'll be relying on you guys to pick up the slack for me. I'm going to begin by introducing these people, and I want you to know who they are, and so let's start there with the one you probably know the best. Dr. Bowen Loftin is an Aggie. He graduated in 1970 after just 3 years. He went on to get a master's and a PhD, and he got back to College Station as quickly as he could, as the saying around here says. He's internationally known for scientific engineering data visualization as well as modeling and simulation. So if you have any questions about that, don't ask him.
Not here.
Yeah, don't ask him, because I wouldn't understand the answers. Today, there's no simulation, but he is modeling his trademark bow tie. Ladies and gentlemen, the president of Texas A&M University, Dr. Bowen Loftin. Our next panelist is so old he saw Jim Brown play. In fairness, he was just a kid when his dad took him to the Cotton Bowl to see Brown and the Orange of Syracuse take on TCU. He's been at almost every Cotton Bowl since then. That was 1957. And his love and appreciation for the Cotton Bowl has led him to a very prestigious position. He's the chairman of the Cotton Bowl Athletic Association. And it's a good thing there's prestige attached to that position, because there is no pay. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the chairman of the Cotton Bowl Athletic Association, who's also an Aggie, class of '71, Tommy Bain. Our next panelist came to Baylor University in 1972. The football program was in a shambles. In fact, the Bears hired Rudy Feldman to coach that year. He quit after 1 day. I hope they didn't have to honor that contract. Feldman's loss was Baylor's gain, though, because it opened the door for Grant Teaff. He resurrected the program and took the Bears to 9 bowl games. He helped orchestrate the miracle on the Brazos in '74 when the Bears beat Texas for the first time in 17 years. And since retiring from coaching, he has been the executive director of the American Football Coaches Association. This guy's forgotten more about football and college football than the rest of us know. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant Teaff. And finally, I can't tell you how excited I am to meet and introduce the next panelist. He knows his way around a college campus because he got his bachelor's degree from Dartmouth. He went on to get a law degree at the University of Virginia and another from Georgetown. Now, it's at this point where a normal moderator might insert a joke about him being a lawyer. But I'm in the media, so that would be kind of like the pot calling the kettle black. Besides, he's so much more than a lawyer. He's the former chairman of the NCAA basketball committee. He's been the commissioner of the Great Midwest Conference, the commissioner of Conference USA, but since July 1st, 2002, he's served as the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, better known as the SEC, and around here, better known as the new home of the Aggies. Woo. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Slive. Did anybody see USA Today today? I always hate saying that. USA Today today? Ryan Tannehill on the front page of the sports section of USA Today, and we're going to talk lots of sports, and we'll get into some of the controversial aspects, but I thought it was a really neat time to be here when Ryan Tannehill is honored in that way, and I thought I would start with Dr. Loftin, just the pride that you feel around this time of year when the draft is upcoming, and certainly Ryan's not the only one, and there have been plenty before him, but the pride you feel when your guy is going on to the NFL and being lauded like this young man is.
Oh, validation's always welcome, sir.
Yes.
It really is. We certainly think People like Ryan Tannehill represent the ideal student athlete, a successful person off the field, on the field, a great leader, someone that you could see marrying your daughter, my age. So quite a young man. That's the kind of player we have at Texas A&M. Quality in terms of their talent as athletes, quality also in terms of their ability.
And also this week on the cover of Sports Illustrated is another former Texas high school football player who Grant Teaff knows quite well, and all of us have come to appreciate his work so much. The Heisman Trophy winner and a guy who many think will be the second overall pick in the draft, RG3 he's become known as. And Grant, I can't imagine in Waco and really anybody who's ever been associated with Baylor how proud you must feel for this young man.
Well, he's an extraordinary athlete. It's pretty obvious. The pros think he's good enough to be one or two. But I got to meet him. I guess he had first come to Baylor at a midterm when he was a freshman. We, of course, can do that in college now. And one of my former players that was injured in 1979, a youngster by the name of Kyle Woods, he was paralyzed from the neck down in an accident on the practice field. And so for 30 years, our coaching staff and our team had looked after him and taken care of him. And a lot of other people jumped in and helped us. But he had passed away, unfortunately, that spring. And we were having the funeral in Dallas. It was about probably 2,000 or 3,000 people there in a large church. And I had seen Robert's picture. I'd never met him, but I'd seen his picture and knew he was coming to Baylor. And I'm speaking at the funeral, and I looked down in the front row. There sat Robert and his mother and daddy. So when we concluded the funeral and before we went to the cemetery, we were kind of gathered around talking. And so I walked over to Robert and his mom and dad, and I said, Robert, I'm Coach Teaff, and I know that you're coming to Baylor. And I was just wondering, did you know Kyle Woods? He said, oh, no, sir. He said, our family, we just knew he was important to Baylor. So they drove from Killeen, Texas to the funeral. So that told me what kind of kid he was, start out with. You know, and of course, he's academically strong and very representative of any institution. Anybody would be proud of him. But I think he's an extraordinary athlete and obviously a great leader.
Yeah, another one who you'd like your daughter to marry if you have a daughter that age. In fact, I bet there's a long line of daughters that like to marry a guy like that with such a good guy and what a great future he has. You chose Texas A&M as one of the schools you wanted to add. What were the factors that the SEC was thinking about and attracted you to them?
Well, it's interesting how you phrase it. Let me turn it just a little bit. Actually, we were 12 institutions, and we were pretty content and not really looking to expand. I think you'll enjoy this part, Mr. President. We have a football media days in July, and we do it in Birmingham, and we do it over 3 days. So we bring, we divide the coaches up into 3 groups, and we bring them, and they bring 2 players, but it's a 3-day affair, and we'll have anywhere from 700 to 1,000 media of all kinds there for the media day. And it's a 3-day affair, so it's a little taxing. I try to give a state of the conference address early in the session. But at the end of the second day, I know I could see the end of the tunnel. The light was coming, and I was almost done with this event. And I'm sitting on my porch and looking out my backyard, just relaxing, and my phone rang. And it was the president of Texas A&M. And he said, would you be willing to talk? And I said, certainly. And we started then a long series of conversations. And it was the fact that Texas A&M is Texas A&M that attracted us. We were not seeking anybody. But when an institution of the quality of Texas A&M comes and wants to talk to you about joining your league, the SEC is, I think, 79 years old, about to be 80 years old next year. And Texas A&M turned out to be the third institution added to the conference in almost 80 years. And what attracted us to Texas A&M, it was really simple. One is the academic performance here, the quality of the academic program and being an AAU member. Two, the commitment to athletic programs that want to compete for the national championship, because that's what we do. And what gets lost a little bit is the fact that it's the commitment to a broad-based program for men and women. Not just football, not just basketball, but the commitment to excellence for anyone who's competing for the Aggies in whatever sport, male or female. And thirdly was the passion, the loyalty, the commitment, and the traditions of the university and of its student body that we thought very much paralleled the tradition and passion that we have in our league. And it really, there was obviously issues that we had to deal with that, thank goodness, are in our rearview mirror. But in terms of the institution, we embraced we embraced Texas A&M right from the beginning. And so maybe this is an appropriate time for me to say to all of you, welcome to the SEC. Whoop.
Very appropriate, very appropriate. Thank you. Dr. Loftin, from your perspective, what did you think? Because you knew that they weren't really seeking any additions to the conference at that point. So it must have been a great sense of pride and accomplishment that, wow, I made this phone call, reached him on his porch, and we carry enough panache that we opened this door at least.
Well, Mike and I met earlier in 2010 during some other conversations going on around the country about realignment. That didn't come to pass, kind of behind us then, but I think I felt a strong kinship with the commissioner at that point. We hit it off pretty well, I believe, to begin with, and we hadn't talked, in fact, since the Cotton Bowl back in 2011. So we kind of accidentally ran into the Cotton Bowl. Remember that day before the game started there, and had a little brief conversation. And so I happened to have Mike's cell phone number, and we had thought pretty hard back in the middle of the summer of last year about our future athletics here. It was pretty clear to us that we needed a different home, one that offered stability and a true sense of kinship in terms of the cultures and institutions involved here. And so when that kind of peaked in late July of 2011, I actually made a phone call right over there, in that little porch over there, during a context of a Board of Regents meeting here in Texas. That's where I called. I was over there when I called you, sir. And so this little room here has a little meaning for me, too. And again, it was like I hadn't talked to him since yesterday. We immediately had a great conversation there, which led to many more conversations. We frequently talked about 7 a.m. every morning before we hit the office.
He's a late sleeper, so it's...
But again, to us, there were two major issues here: stability and visibility for the institution, along with fit. Did we feel comfortable? Was it a series of schools that really seemed to embrace the same principles we embraced, which we felt we really belonged? And the SEC certainly is that by many measures you might be able to imagine.
Yeah, Tommy, many people may not realize, but you deal and have dealt with the SEC for many years because there's a tie to the Cotton Bowl and a natural tie. So you've dealt with the group of teams and of schools that Texas A&M is now headed toward. What are your impressions from 10 years of association with these great institutions?
Yeah, I would say, and I've told Commissioner Slive this, that the SEC is a family. When you go to their spring conference or you go to negotiate with them, as we do from a Cotton Bowl perspective, you're dealing with a tremendous sense of integrity, a very passionate group, and they try and beat each other's brains out, competitively. But when they get off the field, it is amazing the way they work together. Texas A&M has joined a tremendous partnership, and we've seen this over many years in dealing with the SEC. So I applaud Dr. Loftin and the SEC.
Well, and certainly it's been an exciting time for the Aggies, and it's an exciting time for the SEC. But Grant, not everything about realignment is exciting. There are some tradition-rich rivalries that are going by the wayside. As an old-time football coach, is it somewhat bittersweet for you to see all of this happening?
Of course, and I think it is for most people. We're very much, I think, particularly in the South, traditionalist. Rivalry games mean a lot. Relationships. I know when I came into the Southwest Conference and took over at Baylor, I was really amazed at the number of supporters for each of the Southwest Conference schools that lived in Waco. And it sort of was a tradition that, I'm going to support my team, you can believe that. But every other game that Baylor plays, in that case, we're going to be supporting Baylor. And I think that family feel is important, and it has been for years and years. The Southwest Conference goes way, way back as an entity, and then, of course, the Big 12 came into being after that. But I think it is bittersweet for most coaches because you change, rivalries. Many times it's a bigger distance to travel in certain cases. But again, in the times that we live in now, I've been asked about this many times, and my answer has always been that, these are very wise, intelligent individuals that run universities, run conferences, and they look at the broader picture, and they have to take care of their own, so to speak. And so when decisions are made, I kind of feel comfortable with it in that it's been thought out, it's been looked at, traditions have been weighed, other things that are important to people, travel distances and everything, it's all been weighed, even down to the point of how much money is it going to cost us to take teams over here and there, and it has to be thought out. And it's been amazing. I think it seems to be settling in a way that sometimes only nature and the good Lord can take care of. I've been amazed at the way things are falling into place. It's still not over, I don't think. Mike would be certainly more aware of that than I would be, but I think we still got some sifting out to do and a few changes that'll take place. And I think what the commissioners are doing now, and rightly so, as they do ever so often, they're evaluating every aspect of the BCS, which is vital and important to all institutions of the SBS level. And those are continuing decisions that have to be made. And a lot of times realignment is affected by that, the plans that are going on that most of us might not know about. So, from the standpoint of, I think, the former rivals in the Southwest Conference and in the Big 12 of Texas A&M, there's some sadness there. But I think there's also an understanding that this is a new day for Texas A&M and for everybody else. And I personally know that Texas A&M will do great in the Southeast Conference. There's not any doubt about that.
Are we done realigning?
Well, let's see. I think we got to get a schedule for 2013 before we think about much else. I mentioned to some of my friends in the media this morning. We had a nice chance to visit, and it's not easy to absorb an institution into any culture, no matter how similar they are, and then to do two is a lot. So we really have just put all our energy into the transition. We have a transition team in place. We're working on schedules for the future beyond 2012 and in all of our sports, and hope to have those worked out. So I think the answer that I normally give is that we've got our hands full now, and John, and that it's going to take a little while before we can get everything to the point where we're moving ahead and we're not thinking about newness.
Dr. Loftin, I know one of the taglines on this process for you was, look, we want to be in a good place for Texas A&M for the next 100 years. But given the shifting nature of these things, it isn't necessarily for 100 years, is it? Maybe with these schools, but not necessarily with this conference. Maybe the conference changes.
Well, I wouldn't quite phrase it that way either. I think that we made a decision about the SEC as it is today. Mike was not going out campaigning for more members for his conference. That wasn't true of everybody else, but he certainly wasn't doing that. We just went there because we knew it was the right place for him to be. If you have to look at the landscape today and you ask which conferences are going to survive almost anything, the SEC is going to be on your list, no matter who you are, I think. And so again, I mentioned stability a while ago, sir, and that was important to us. We didn't want to go through this kind of gut-wrenching, difficult analysis, decision-making process anytime soon. 100 years is certainly a number that's out there, not as an exact value, but just giving a sense of how we believe stability exists in this conference today and in the future, and why we made that particular decision. Again, I can't predict the future, but I think any future involving conferences is going to include the SEC in my lifetime and probably well beyond it.
We've all heard as soon as the BCS championship game was played this year, the process began of trying to determine how it's going to change and when it's going to change. And the most popular idea that we've heard thus far, the one that seems to have the most legs, is this +1 game where you would play an extra championship game. And Mike, what do you think? Is that something that is the most likely among the possibilities for changes to the BCS?
I'm going to tell you, you're not going to like my answer. So let me get you ready. I'm not going to tell you anything about the BCS. So I said that to my friends in the media who are back there today, that we're going to meet starting on Monday. It's a long process. We don't have to make a decision until late summer. And that I've said often that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And next week we have our annual BCS meetings, and we'll sit down and continue to talk about the possibilities and weigh the advantages and disadvantages of all of them. And we'll see where it ultimately comes out. We all have to talk with our conferences in due course. It's inappropriate for me, John, to really get into any of the details. I think we're all trying to analyze this very carefully. We all understand how important it is. And that's why we're taking our time. And last time we met, we issued a document that showed some of the things that we were thinking about, and we'll go back and continue to talk about all those things. In that context, with all due respect to all the questions that you have, I do understand how interested everybody is, and but the reality is we are in the middle of a lot of quality discussion, and until we get to a point where we can make a decision, I think it's best that we just continue to have those kind of discussions.
Grant, most coaches and former coaches I talk to like the idea of a playoff. Is that your experience with the coaches that you deal with?
No. I don't know who you've been talking to. I just picked this up as I left the office. I work closely with BCS folks in the way of they're very good about listening to our coaches. They all deal with their own coaches in the various conferences, but we represent the American Football Coaches Association, the 120 football coaches in the BCS, plus 12,000 others in all the other different venues, including high school. And every year I do a survey in February on issues, and we usually publish them. And I told Bill Hancock, who is the executive director of the BCS, I'd called him to see if there are any questions that he would like for me to pose to our coaches. And so I told him that I've given it to him for the conference commissioners to look at and to know about the feeling of the coaches. And I told him that we hadn't released it and won't. But since you asked the question, I feel that I need to at least respond to that particular one about a playoff. Here's really some interesting things. One that you might be interested in is that you were mentioning a number of bowl games. When I came into the Southwest Conference, we had sort of upset the world in 1974 by being in a position to win the championship. And we come down to the Rice game, and interestingly enough, we had won 8 ball games, and if we don't beat Rice and win the championship, we don't go to a bowl game. There wasn't another bowl game. There was one, the Cotton Bowl. And that's why the Cotton Bowl, through all the years, for all the folks with the history of the Southwest Conference and the Big 12, it's the place. You know, green and gold in the Cotton Bowl. They started yelling that at Baylor every summer, you know, and they had yelled it for 50 years and hadn't gotten there, so finally we did get there. But that whole thing has changed. The number of, Mike, every year with his conference, they have to figure out where everybody's going to go, and it goes way down. If you win 6 ball games now, you're going to be in a bowl game. And there may be a point with the number of bowl games that we have where, I hope it never happens, but they put somebody in that had a losing season. And I think we had that nearly happen out at UCLA this year, Mike, with that circumstance out there. But let me just see if I can answer a couple of questions for you. This deals with the bowl. It says, how supportive would you be of increasing the requirements for bowl games so that teams would have to have a record of 7-5 or better to go to a bowl game? And you would imagine it sort of levels out in the voting based on, you know, where you are in the pecking order. And so it was pretty well balanced. Very unsupportive was the largest number of 43%, 12% somewhat unsupportive, and 22 and 23% very and somewhat supportive of moving it up. So I know who they were, but I can tell you that it breaks out sort of balanced on the folks that just would be thrilled to death to get in the bowl game, like Baylor was 2 years ago. They hadn't been to one since I'd left there. And so it's important for our coaches. The bowls are very paramount to our coaches and our athletes. Don't ever forget that. That is very, very meaningful. Yes, it's great that we have a chance to have a national champion, but I'm telling you, this is very, very important. And of course, Mike and the folks, the commissioners, know and understand that. It's a part of college football. ESPN and Fox know and understand it because they got a jillion bowls that they deal with. But there's not a bad bowl as far as coaches and the athletes are concerned. Don't ever forget that. They're all good bowls. But I think this might be of interest to you. Which would you prefer to conclude a season with? And the current system drew 33%. A postseason football tournament, which would be a tiered type tournament, drew 16%. But a 4-team tournament and the current bowl system drew the most, which was 50% when you look at the totality of it. So I think the other thing here is if a postseason tournament were to be started for the football subdivision in the future, which of the following tournament playoff formats would you prefer? These are the head coaches answering this. 50% of them preferred the 4-team that they're all talking about. 8-team, 11%, 16-team, 14%, 24-team, 9%, and 15% said, I have no idea what to do. But that gives you a little bit of idea about how the coaches feel about the bowl system. Trust me. And the playoff thing is important, and these guys looked at every angle of it, the commissioners have. But you also have to remember we're playing 12 games, and there is a wear and tear on folks that play at a highest level. And the more games you have, the more wear and tear you have. And I think presidents and commissioners and all of us think first and foremost about the safety and well-being of our student athletes. If we're not doing that, we're doing wrong. And so I think that has to weigh in, is how much further can you go? The other thing, and I know that presidents have always been concerned about, I served on the original committee of the NCAA that looked at having a playoff system. And it went on for a long time. And the opinion was no, not in college football. And I had a lot of presidents on that committee, and they were deeply concerned, and rightly so, about the academic part of it and how far over do you go with the playoff system. And that's the reason I think, wisely so, the BCS came into play. The old system, and none of you in here would know what that was. It was a mythical championship, mythical. that means that we played the season, and then however the polls were at the end, that's who the champion was. And 2 or 3 times I know Nixon one time declared declared the champion over Arkansas and Texas, and that's what it was. The media jumped on it, so we got a national champion right here. So the BCS idea, I was driving through Mississippi and got a call from Roy Kramer, and he said, Coach, here's what we're thinking about. Could we get the American Football Coaches Association involved to utilize your poll as a selection process? Now, that's a big deal for us. We had to go back and say, we're no longer a championship poll, we are a part of the selection process. So we have done that through all of these years. And we do have our trophy that the BCS has adapted, the Crystal Ball, and that's very important to all of our coaches as well. You think they don't strive to get that baby and kiss it? I just don't want them fumbling it anymore, okay? That was bad.
What year was that original committee to study this? Do you remember?
It was in the early 90s. I was still coaching football. It ran through about 93, I think. And it was very thorough. We had people come in, big financial people that were able to say, okay, if you do this, it's worth this much money and so forth and so on. It was extremely thorough. And I laugh when I see people talking about, oh, well, we'll just have a big playoff. They hadn't studied it, because it's a different ball game.
I just wanted to say just one thing on something Coach Teaff was saying. Just from a bowl perspective, the tension that I think the commissioners are working on is the public wants a clear-cut champion, and how do you determine a clear-cut champion? And yet, at the same time, there's such a rich legacy and history to so many schools getting to participate in the postseason in college football, where universities get a chance to travel, the fans, the students, the administration, the things that are accomplished during bowl week and all across the nation are very important. And so those are the things they're really trying to balance. And just one quick example, this past year, Kansas State came to the Cotton Bowl, versus Arkansas. And on the Thursday night before the Friday night Cotton Bowl, Kansas State had 15,000 people at Ranger Stadium for a pep rally, and used the large video screen out there to introduce their stadium expansion. They couldn't have done that if it was just a smaller playoff and they were eliminated in some way. And so the residual effect that's unique to college football, that is not unique to basketball or baseball or some of the others, is what goes on, really not just the game itself, but everything around the game. And I know they're trying to preserve those aspects, as well as, provide a unique thing at the top.
Let me give you an early observation, and for all, particularly the younger folks here today, history is always important, and why you go about doing something, I think, is extremely significant. BCS gets tons of negative criticism all the time. We all know it, see it. Mike lives with it, as do our other friends that are commissioners. But going back, when I received that telephone call from Roy Kramer, and I'm driving down the road, he's probably in an office somewhere, and I said, well, what do you want to try to do with this? What is the major goal? And he said, number one goal is we want to make the college football season valid and important every year. Now, he had, like Mike, served with basketball, so he knew the big ramifications of a big playoff system, which ended in the Final Four. Is terrific, it's great. But that was the number one thing. And if you just think about where we are in football coming from that time right now, it's never been more witnessed, it's never been more attended, which two different things, witness television, and then of course it's never been more popular. College football is the game, and it's rightly so. And that all stems back from these decisions that they made early on. The second thing I said to Roy, what is then the ultimate thing that you want to do as far as getting a championship? He says, we want to have some system of selecting what we all agree is the best two teams at the time and let them play for the championship. That's the premise of it. Of course, all the criticism comes because somebody has to make that decision. I was skeptical, very frankly, at first with the computers, but I'm big sold on that now. They do a really great job as their third of this equation. And so no matter how much criticism the media and fans and everybody else wants to give the BCS has played the most important role in college football that's been played since Teddy Roosevelt called everybody together and says, you better fix this sucker, I'm going to eliminate it from the American scene in 1906. And so, you know, criticism may come, but the proof's in the pudding, what's happened.
In fact, Mike, it seems like with the BCS, it has put more emphasis on each Saturday's game takes on added importance because of BCS ramifications.
Absolutely.
No question about it. The regular season in college football, as a coach said, is just extraordinary. And it doesn't, if your game is August 31 or September 1, that game means something. And what also has happened is games in other parts of the country that really wouldn't have mattered to other parts of the country. It would have been a regional game, maybe it meant something to the state or two that are involved, now means something to the nation. And so we have nationalized the, you know, the relationship between institutions in the sport of football. And you know, one premise that all of us in the room use is to protect this wonderful regular season. We've said that publicly, we say it over and over again. You know, whatever we might do, we want to protect the regular season.
Tommy, what about from a bowl perspective now that we have shifted to the extent that we have at this point? How does it affect the bowls?
Well, you know, I would say that all the conference realignment, you know, is a result of some unintended consequences, which the bowls actually have played a part in, I think, and the BCS has played a part in. As all of that got put together over the last 10 to 15 years, there was this demand to be included. And so there were a lot of schools that wanted to move into BCS conferences. And I think that, you know, I don't think that the people that laid out the original BCS thought, you know, and you wouldn't think that would happen. But some of those earthquakes began, you know, because of that and what's going on. I think if I could address what's going on now, and I'm not in the room with these guys, and the right guys are in the room. You don't want the bowl guys in there making the decision. You know, they'd make the wrong decision. They'd make it, you know, just for what was right for the bowls, and that's not necessarily what's right for college football. You know, the commissioners who represent the presidents and the athletic directors and the administrations are the ones that should make that decision. I think that just goes back to something that Coach Teaff said. You know, the Cotton Bowl has such a rich history, but the unintended consequences are you know, involved us along the way. We hosted the champion of the Southwest Conference for something like 60 years. Or 55 years, and then the Southwest Conference broke up. So now, you know, we don't have that host team. The Big 12 gets put together between the Big 8 and a portion of the Southwest Conference. They choose the Fiesta Bowl, and there's lots of reasons that go on there. The northern teams, the Big 8, of course, used to always go to the Orange Bowl. They were used to going to a warm weather site, and I think Phoenix was more attractive to them. It was just that simple. And we still had the old Cotton Bowl, an antiquated stadium. And you know, a lot of people don't realize that it was at that time that the Orange Bowl left the Orange Bowl. It was an old antiquated stadium, and they moved into pro players. And the Sugar Bowl left the old Sugar Bowl, the wonderful old Tulane Stadium, moved into the new Superdome. We didn't have any place to go. We were still there at Fair Park with an old antiquated stadium and unfortunately a city that just didn't have the vision to keep upgrading and building for the future. Along the way, you know, we played the cards that were dealt to us. We wanted to do the very best thing possible and still be the best bowl in the country. We think we've tried to do that very hard, and then, Jerry Jones' family comes along and builds a palace, right in our backyard that is just phenomenal for big events. And there's just nothing in the nation that can compete with that in terms of hosting a big event. It'll host the Final Four here in 2 years, and it'll set records, I think, for the Final Four. So we believe we're now positioned very well for whatever the new format's going to be. And if I may say just real quickly, from a bowl perspective, I think if you ask most people involved in bowls, they would say don't change anything. Just keep it the bowls and let us have our tie-ins, with the conferences. The Cotton Bowl really doesn't take that perspective. Our perspective is we want to be the very best postseason college experience. And if that moves a little more towards a +1 or a little playoff, whatever it is, we want to be involved in it. We want to be in the middle of that. And we think the state of Texas and the Dallas-Fort Worth area is well positioned to do that. So we'll wait, see what the new format is, and then we'll see what our opportunities are within that, and whether we'll continue to have contracts with the SEC and the Big 12, as well as an opportunity to move up, depending on the way they format it. We'll be prepared, whatever the scenario is.
You mentioned the 9 bowl tie-ins, and the schools that I've had the chance to talk to, if they're not going to the BCS game, one of their favorites, if not their favorite, is always the Cotton Bowl. Do you, in your dealings with your schools, get a positive feedback? Even with the chairman of the Cotton Bowl sitting here, do you?
I love Tommy. But one thing commissioners don't do is they don't make those kind of comparisons if you want to continue to be a commissioner. So we love the Cotton Bowl.
Tommy, it's true though. People say that.
And we have a contract with the SEC. So
that's good. That's good. You must be proud though of the way people enjoy your bowl. You can feel it when they come into town.
Can I say something before you?
Sure.
I do think that the Cotton Bowl deserves a lot of credit. I mean, Tommy's talked about maybe they'd like to be in another configuration and all that business. But, when you bring a team to play in the Cotton Bowl now, like we've done, in that stadium, in the atmosphere and the excitement and all that surrounds that game, the Cotton Bowl doesn't have to apologize to anybody for what they provide our student athletes and our coaches. And Grant is right when he says that for a football player or a coach, there is no bowl that isn't a success. And one of the things we talk about in the bowl system is the fact that we can send as many as 1,000 of our student athletes every year to have a postseason experience, one they might not otherwise have, and that's an important part of the bowl system.
That must make the Cotton Bowl proud, Tommy.
Yeah, thanks, John. We do work hard. We work hard at what we do. We love what we do. We love giving back to the conferences and to the member institutions. In fact, in our history, we've given back just slightly under $200 million to the conferences and the schools that have been participants. So it's important to us. It's important to the schools, that participate. But we're in a unique situation, where we are, where we're located, with the tremendous stadium and great people that support us. Just a couple of quick examples, and we will be sold out for next year's Cotton Bowl game middle summer, much like Texas A&M with their season tickets, are sold out. We have the same situation. We have, the patrons in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and our sponsors and all that, buy all of the available tickets except those that we hold back for, each member school. So we're in a very unique situation, and over the last 5 years, we're the number 2 most attended postseason bowl game. Only the Rose Bowl with their 90,000 plus have more than us. We've averaged 82,500, over the last 5 years. So, we've had great matchups, and the SEC is a huge part of that. You all will be interested to know that the LSU Texas A&M game, of all the games that have been played at Cowboy Stadium, that is the number 1 revenue producer for that stadium. Texas A&M bought every suite in that stadium in 24 hours. In fact, we didn't realize that was going on. We had to put a stop on it because when I heard that, I said, LSU's going to kill us. When they start calling, we said, we got to hold some. And so we put a stop on it so we could have some suites for LSU. But between all the suites being sold and the catering, and, you know, thanks to LSU's enjoying what they do, in evenings. You know, that stadium produced, you know, more revenue than any home Cowboy game. You know, only the Super Bowl was greater than that, but that wasn't that was the NFL, not the Cowboy Stadium. So, you know, we're proud of that and proud of what we're doing there, and we think we've got a really bright future.
Well, and I don't know if you can, yes, please.
Just Tommy, you know, I think you agree that the Aggies have always had a special place, the Cotton Bowl, in our hearts here. But how many Aggies are on your board now?
Probably 15. We've got a few. And by the way, I will just say from my Cotton Bowl hat, you know, I have an A&M hat, and one of the things that we do, just like the commissioner said, you know, there's certain things he can't say as a commissioner. There's certain things as the Cotton Bowl chairman I can't say from time to time, you know, depending on where I am. But we all say when we go into a meeting, we take off our college affiliation and we put on our Cotton Bowl hat. And our small group in there is a tremendous group. And we do what's going to be best for the Cotton Bowl. Not necessarily what's going to be best for A&M or Texas or something, but we really say what is best for the Cotton Bowl and for the conferences that we're associated with. So, you know, that's the attitude, you know, that we take, you know, when we move into those.
And I don't know if you can answer this one, Tommy, but in respect to the discussion we had about the changes that might be coming, it sounds like, to quote the guy who built the stadium, you play the Cotton Bowl, and now Jerry Jones, you're kind of keeping your powder dry. Right now, you're ready for anything. Can you answer, will the Cotton Bowl be a player if there's a +1?
We certainly hope so. You know, all we want, we just want an opportunity, you know, to participate at the highest level, because that's why we're in business, is to provide the very best postseason. We don't know what that decision is going to be, and when they make that decision, then we'll know, you know, what our opportunities will be, and all we want, you know, is that opportunity, and I think if we get that opportunity, we'll be great. You know, the irony of this is the BCS situation has came into existence, as Coach Teaff said, was really to get number 1 and number 2. Under the old system, everyone had ties to all the bowls, and so 1 and 2 very rarely played one another. So really it was a coalition in order to get that to happen, and that has happened. So it's been successful in that. What's been maybe unsuccessful is what's happened to maybe who's ranked number 3 through number 10, and some of the controversy of what bowls they go to or they don't go to, and I know all the commissioners will be wrestling with that. Well, in the interim, the Cotton Bowl is sitting there with a Big 12 and SEC contract, and I would say over the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, we've had better matchups than a lot of the BCS games. So, you know, matchups are very important too, and we just happen to be aligned with 2 great conferences that produce with great fans, and so we've been very, very fortunate.
This question for Tommy. Now with A&M in the SEC and Texas in the Big 12, I have to just know your thoughts on that matchup. Since we don't play each other, you know, how quickly you guys would jump on that A&M Texas game?
How about January? You know what? Everyone has been talking about that, and you know what? You know, the stars have to align, you know, for that to happen. You know, the good news is with our SEC contract, we have not lost Texas A&M. They're still in our footprint. I can tell you the Alamo Bowl, who has just a Big 12 contract, you know, is not happy with losing A&M from their inventory. You know, because that's a, you know, A&M is a school that people would really love to have come to their bowls. So we're very fortunate. As the Cotton Bowl, we have not lost Texas A&M. You know, Texas A&M is still in our inventory under our current contract. Of course, we'll have the SEC championship game, I'm sure, pretty soon. So when we talk to Commissioner Slive, but I think you know, everyone's already, you know, I can't tell you the number of people that are already talking about, are you going to put them together? You're going to put them together, and Texas people are talking about that too. So, it'll be fun when it happens.
Obviously, we just came through another great NCAA basketball tournament. But then right after it, we see again for the second time in the past few years, the Kentucky players are all declaring for the NBA draft. I wonder how that hits you, that the entire group, the starting five, is all going to leave after 1 year.
Well, I don't think any of us like the current rule. It's not our rule.
Yeah.
People forget that this isn't a rule. This is a rule that relates to the NBA and the NBA Players Association. So it's a rule that's out there. And the reason we don't like the rule is simply because when a young man leaves at the end of 1 year, he's a little farther from graduation than we would like. If in football you stay 3 years, you're closer to getting that degree. So it's really an academic issue. I think John Calipari has said that, that he doesn't like the rule either. I don't like the rule. None of us like the rule. But these are great young men. They're going to play college basketball someplace because they have no choice. So, treat them well and give them opportunities. So, whether they play at Kentucky or play someplace else, it doesn't really matter. If we could change the rule, we would change the rule, but we can't.
Universities, from a university standpoint, Dr. Loftin, I would assume you feel pretty much the same way along those lines. If someone does choose to come here and play for only 1 year, you'll just give them the best experience they can have while they're here?
We will, but again, we want people to graduate.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised how many recruits come in here in all sports, and I end up talking oftentimes not to the player directly, but to the mother. And the mother realizes that there isn't always going to be an NFL contract at the end of the day, or an NBA contract at the end of the day here. And she asked me, well, what will my son have, or my daughter have when they leave this university? And, I want to say a degree that means something, has true value. And that's the problem, And, of course, I realize the cream of the crop are the ones that peel off here. But even there, an injury, anything can go wrong with your life then. It derails you at a point where you may not have the ability or the opportunity to go back and finish the degree. So I really emphasize to the recruit, to the athlete, to the parent, the most important reason you're coming here is not to play ball or tennis or golf or whatever, it's to get that degree. And that playing may get you there because it helps you with a scholarship. It gives you a great way to develop yourself physically and mentally alongside of your education, but it's not why you're here. And that's my mantra. And it's not always going to be effective, but we try to make that clear. And we do pretty good here. We don't have a lot of people peeling off before they get their degree, and I'm proud of that part. But so many who do just can't come back again for whatever reason, and that's a shame.
Yeah, it is. And Grant, you know better than anyone, perhaps football, all sports, it's so difficult. The odds are so long for you to make it and to make money playing any of these games after college. That degree becomes even more important.
Well, I think the most important thing, honestly, is that they figure some way and come with a commitment themselves to finish their degree. I think that's really the most important. That's what I always hammered, and I think most coaches will do that. The idea that we have with dealing with the NFL, and they have worked very closely with us on this, is the 3 years is very, very important. And one of the things that, Paul Tagliabue started out, promised me when we first negotiated a bunch of problems that we had in the 80s, and we got those settled, and it's a good working condition now. But he looked me in the eye and promised me that the NFL would always stay with the 3 years and that they would defend it, whatever it costs to do it. And they have done it on a couple of occasions from a legal standpoint. And so we feel that's very important. Anything less than 3 years, we don't feel in football that a youngster is physically mature enough yet, psychologically mature enough. They don't know how to handle the big money that comes in. They're at the disposal of people that will take advantage of them. So 3 years should be a minimum, and I would love to see the NBA do the same thing, but I don't know that that'll ever happen.
Yeah, it was an advancement to get them to do 1 year, because for a while there, they were taking the kids right out of high school.
Yeah, that's right.
Is the NCAA's rules are obviously, voluminous, and they're stacks and stacks of them. How difficult is it to navigate all that from an institution standpoint?
Very difficult, sir. You have to re-educate your coaches all the time. The rules evolve, and that's not a bad thing, but the rules are large in number. They're oftentimes highly complex. There are interpretation issues that get involved oftentimes with these rules. And to keep a coach who's very busy recruiting and training and managing the team, to get them up to speed continuously on what's going on in these rules here is a challenge. So I'm sure the presidents would all love to see a simpler system here, one that has common sense built into it in a very direct way. Let me just kind of take a little sidelight, if you don't mind. One of the things that I've discovered, interestingly, about my colleagues, I talk to a lot of presidents of the universities, and I always ask them a question. Well, at your university, who does your compliance officer report to? And the answer is usually either the AD or the president. Well, that to me is interesting. Here it's to the president, and that's the way I would want it. And I tell them, how many chicken hawks and chickens do you want to put together in a situation like this? It's not that I don't trust my AD, but it's not fair to the compliance officer, who has a very, very important job, to worry about who his boss is, and to worry about pleasing his boss. So I believe the right way to do it is the way we do it here, which is David Batson reports to me. He knows I'm his boss. He knows to come to me with anything. And I hear about every secondary violation the moment it happens. I know what's going on with that violation being worked through, and that makes me comfortable that we're going to do exactly the right thing to comply with the NCAA or the SEC rules, whatever we have to deal with here. That's the right answer here. And the more I'm separated from that process, the worse it's going to be. But having said all of that, because of that, I get involved in these things. I know how complicated the rules can be. And some of the things under discussion now are good things. Looking at, right now we have secondary violations and major violations, and that's a huge gap sometimes. And the gradation of that is very difficult. And the proposal to do more gradations of secondaries is a good thing, because some of these things are minute, some are very major, and how do you really give the right attention to each one here? And so there's good things now being discussed within the NCAA in terms of legislation that will help us get a better situation. But again, I come back to the point, how many rules do we need? How complex do they have to be? How hard is the interpretation to make? And the education of the coach, the athlete, and the booster is very difficult. And that's a continuous process. By the time you do one cycle, you're doing another one. And I wonder how much energy we can expend in continually re-educating all the people here that have to know what's going on. And oftentimes, violations can be fairly innocuous. People can make mistakes because they just didn't know, or they heard 50 things, remembered 49, but not the 50th. So that's what you get into with this. So I'm not criticizing the NCAA. I'm simply saying we've got to find a way to make it rational, simpler, and fairer in terms of how we handle the infraction results we get comparing one to another, when they may be very widely separated in the actual consequences of those.
It's interesting that you talk about that at this point in time. I have been for the last about a year now serving on what is referred to as a working group. We have 5 of them now for the NCAA, looking at every aspect of NCAA. And we put in, last count was over 100 hours since last October in meetings dealing with these issues. And they're very critical issues. 3 years ago, AFCA, we went to the NCAA because we were concerned about secondary violations, and Mike knows about this, we've met and talked about this, that secondary violations covered too big a scan of things. There's a big difference in some technical violation that somebody stumbles on and inadvertently makes it, than some coach going out and buying a cell phone that's disposable and making illegal phone calls. There's a big difference in that, but yet they were all under the same category. So we have asked them to separate that. This was 3 years ago. And to be able to determine if there is an advantage being taken by an institution or a coach, then that should be punished on a level much greater than what's secondary. So now, through this committee that I'm on, We've now settled down on about 4 things that are going to be presented to the board, and it breaks it down really well. That one category that used to be called secondary will have another name. But anything that where an institution or a coach gets an advantage should be punished. We also call for, and the NCAA has done it, to suspend coaches if they are proven to be violators. They are convicted. They should be suspended. I wanted 5 games, which is 5 weeks. But the NCAA lawyers, this was 2 years ago, NCAA lawyer says we can't do that, but we can go 2. So since that time, it's not publicized, but there have been several coaches suspended for 2 games. What I'd like to see right now, and we're working hard to get this done, is that there is a culpability and there is a responsibility. If I hire an assistant coach and he violates the NCAA rules, then that's on my watch. I, as a head coach, should be responsible for that individual, and I should get the same penalty that that assistant coach gets. Now, you're going to get a little pushback when you start dealing in that area, because that says, well, where does that stop? Is the AD responsible for the head coach? Is the president responsible for the AD? My opinion is yeah, but that's somebody else's decision. And what I think is happening is that we are going into an era where there's 2 things. Number one, we've got folks working hard to deregulate some of these rules that the president mentioned a moment ago. For instance, text messaging, Facebook, all of those things. You can do it this during this time. You can't do that. You can't make this call. Deregulate. Because what happens if you don't do that, the cheaters get an advantage. The people that are going to go by the rules, they're at a tremendous disadvantage. And so that should be deregulated. And I think it will.
What is the president's overall take on all of this right now, even as some changes might be on the horizon?
Well, I think the coach put a pretty good perspective on it here. The number one priority we all have as university presidents is to assure the safety of our students. Number 2 is to guarantee their academic success, because we're here to graduate people. And number 3 is to have a good time in terms of promoting athletics that really can catalyze a lot of great things around a college campus. I'll just say one thing, not quite to your question right here, but what I've seen in my reasonably short term as a president here, it's about 3 years now, is a real shift to the presidents taking a lot more responsibility and a lot closer look at athletics. When I came into the Big 12, my first meeting was June of 2009, and I asked around about, what's been the culture here over the life of the Big 12? Well, it turns out that initially the president didn't come. They didn't come very often to the meetings. The board would meet, and there'd be surrogates there for the presidents. Struck me, this is pretty important stuff, and not always left to a delegate to send there on your behalf, many of whom weren't really empowered to say much or do much. And so I saw just in my 3 years, maybe because of some of the things going on right now that we talked about earlier, that we're paying attention. We realize this is important stuff. You can't just delegate to somebody else. I think you would say too as a commissioner, sir, that the presidents are engaged. They need to be engaged. This is important for the students, it's important for the institution, and you just can't let it go. And so I believe we've seen kind of a shift in my short time again, from maybe a somewhat laissez-faire view of things where you let it go, it kind of runs itself, basically, let the ADs take care of it, to one where the president are getting directly involved. Now, some might not like that, and there may be some ADs and commissioners that don't like the presidents being involved because we may be regarded as amateurs out there in these matters. But ultimately, the buck stops at your desk, and the accountability directed at you by your board has got to be dealt with. And if we screw up in a major way in terms of making a decision in athletics, that may be the end of your presidency. And again, I bring it back to what it's all about. We don't view athletics as something which is standing off by itself over here in a building or in a stadium. It is integrally part of what this university is. We think the student athlete should be someone who is integrated thoroughly with the institution, and that you can see them every day, go to class with them, enjoy knowing them as friends, even though on the weekends you're up there and they're down there. That's okay, that's the way it should be. We don't want to have, two classes of students here at Texas A&M. We're all students of this university. We want to all enjoy our lives together. We have different roles here, different functions and so on. But there's ways to make that happen. So just kind of a long answer, but coming back to it, I really believe now we're seeing maybe the most ever engagement of the presidents in the conferences, in the BCS discussions, everywhere else right now, and that's a good thing, I believe.
I think so too, and it seems that, probably in more ancient times, relatively speaking, and I'll address this to you, Mike, there was a little more division. There was perhaps jealousy between sort of the academic side of a campus and the athletic side of a campus, and it seems like, as Dr. Loftin describes, it's coming together more and more, and in fact, there seems to be tremendous pride in an SEC, for example, where each institution, academic and athletic side, are all very proud of what the profile that this conference has accomplished.
Well, I think one of the roles of a commissioner in the governance of a conference is to understand the distinctions and then to create a synergy between the athletic directors, for example. We also have faculty athletic representatives, we have senior one administrators. But just for purpose of discussion, the synergy between the presidents and the athletic directors. In our league, it's really very good. It's clear that the presidents are in charge. My contract is with the presidents. I report to the presidents. That's the way it should be. The athletic directors in our league are involved in everything that we do, and they're very much involved in the competition and in all the things that make the work, there's a revenue side they're very much involved in. But the presidents are involved in the philosophy and the policy of who we are, where we're going, what's our mission, and it works extremely smoothly. And one example I often cite is one would think that what bowls you play in, we have 9 bowl tie-ins. I think last year we sent 10 teams to bowls, and last year maybe 9. But the athletic directors study the bowls every 4 years now. We've been redoing our relationships. And then the athletic directors make a recommendation to the presidents about what bowls the conference they would recommend we work with. And the presidents then look at it and can approve it or not. The point here is that it's an athletic matter, but who you align with and when you're going to play and all the issues is really one of philosophy and policy. And so we found that's an example of how we marry between our athletic directors and our presidents, the way we do our business. And one point is interesting. Our presidents meet at least 3 times a year in person, and in addition to any special meetings, and that we don't allow substitutes. So if a president can't come, and they have the schedule 5 years in advance, the institution's not represented. I've been in the league 10 years, and I can hardly think of maybe twice, maybe or 3 times a president couldn't make it. And that gives you a sense of the importance in which and they're very knowledgeable. They understand what we're trying to do.
Mike, I assume you know this person, and it's an interesting week, a big week in that Pat Summitt decided to retire this week, and I just wonder, she was honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor that can be given to a civilian, and I wonder how, from your perspective, I'm sure you know Pat, what your thoughts are.
A lot of thoughts. I've been working with Pat for 10 years as the commissioner of the conference. She is an extraordinary woman, an extraordinary person. I've talked about Pat as maybe the greatest basketball coach in history. And the reason I say that is not so much because of her wins. She's got well over 1,000 wins. But it's because, in effect, she created a sport and nurtured a sport and pioneered a sport, and now that sport's in full blossom. And she had an ability long before all of us started talking about being interactive. She nurtured a fan base and made them interactive. When I went to a game this year, went into the locker room before the game, and in there she had her coaches for the game with 12 people or so who are now in that room. They're fans, and they're listening to everything that the coaches are telling the kids about the game. And she's been doing that now for 40 years and has a passionate fan base. So she created not only a sport and elevated the sport, but now we have the kind of sport that she's really responsible for. And I think that separates her from a lot of other great coaches. And then the courage that she has to, when she was diagnosed, with early onset dementia, the courage that she had to stand up and tell everybody right away. She didn't hesitate for a minute. And the fact that I thought Tennessee creating the head coach emeritus was really a very, very lovely way of honoring Pat. And we've also said that we've asked Pat to serve as a consultant to us in the conference office for women's basketball. Nobody knows the sport better. It's and some days it's a sad day, but it's a celebration in a way. So, and I just one other personal note: when we meet with our women's basketball coaches, like we do with all our coaches groups, I always was struck because she was a legend long before I got here. And you walk in a room of coaches, and you would think that that this was her first day, and she hadn't won 2 games. I mean, she never tries to impose herself on anybody. She's thoughtful, she's dynamic, she's strong, she's got great thoughts, but she does it in a way that I thought was incredibly gracious for the status that she had.
Dr. Loftin, you're just a year removed at the institution from a national basketball championship in women's basketball yourselves. In some ways, that's not possible without Pat Summitt, is it?
Well, Mike's right. She established the sport. We benefit. I mean, we've come a long ways in my lifetime here at A&M. Which I was here, we didn't have women's sports at all.
Yeah.
But my point simply is that women's basketball here, when it started out, was not popular, was not successful. Bringing Gary Blair here from the SEC was a stroke of genius for our AD here, and I think it's worked out wonderfully. And what's happened here is a mini of what's happened in Tennessee. I mean, in his time here, Gary Blair has taken this program a long ways. He's walked the neighborhoods. He's begged people to come to the games, and guess what? It's worked. It's taken a while, but we've not only gotten the championship, we've also gotten a huge fan base built up here that's passionate about women's basketball, and I'm one of them, quite frankly. And I think that really would not have happened without the example that Pat set and the establishment of that sport with real credibility at a school like Tennessee.
And Grant, what you realize as a coach is coaches are coaches, and she could probably coach anything. She's a great coach. And
Absolutely. I was just sitting here thinking when both of them mentioned the importance of that and the truth of the matter, and that's why everybody has their role. But as far as a team is concerned, the most important role is that coach and what that coach brings to that team, and then what he brings in terms of a recruit to create an environment within a team. We see it all over. It's not whether you're a good male coach. Coaches are coaches, and there's one right up the road here that's I think Kim could coach any sport, really do, and be good at it. Not probably as successful as she is in basketball, but I'm one of those like Mike and others that have lived through the gender equity issue. I was also on the first gender equity issue committee with the NCAA, and the athletic director from LSU, Joe Dean, was on there. We got banged around a lot, I don't mind telling you. We came out with bruises and bleeding, but the thing that I've seen change is a wonderful opportunity for women in college athletics, and the gender equity issue was the thing that pushed that. And then the popularity has been created by the way they play and the way they coach. So I've seen it all over. When I was the athletic director at Baylor, women's basketball was not anywhere even inside of where it is now, but they were good people and good folks playing it. But it all depends on that leader, and that's true in everything. It's about leadership.
Tommy, you want to weigh in?
Well, I was telling Commissioner Slive on the way over here, I was one of the greatest freshman basketball players in the history of Texas A&M. And Coach Metcalf was my coach, and he was such a good coach, he recognized I shouldn't play my sophomore year. So that's the extent of my background, in basketball. But I love the game of basketball. So, you know, and Coach Summit, yeah, what an institution. I've been up there. I've been at Tennessee to one of the women's games, and it's an amazing thing that she's created.
A very special thing.
Hi, my question is for Coach Teaff. First of all, I want to say I realize that a scholarship to Baylor University, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, that gives tuition, room, board, and books is a very valuable commodity. But when you consider what the Division I football player is earning for his school, if he's down on that field and all these seats are filled and CBS cameras are up there in the press box televising the game nationwide and all this money is coming in, are college football players fairly compensated for what they do?
You know, one of the things that I have said for several years now, that in athletics we have done a terrible job in making sure that every student athlete understood that the greatest opportunity that he would ever have is to be able to go to college and get a degree. It will change their lives dramatically. The long haul of a full life, the earning power is incredible. A scholarship is one of the most important things that a student can get. Let me just say this. I run a pretty big organization. There's a lot of money that comes into that organization. They don't pay me based on a percentage of what comes into that organization. I guarantee you that. It's a lot less. But that's the whole key. It's not whether a student athlete's being cheated out of money. Their value is the opportunity to get an education, the experience of a college, and then those that are really good, when they take that next step, jingle, jingle, jingle goes the change. And, you know, it's, I just never have bought into that. There's a lot of people, oh, you know, the poor student athletes are going to be mistreated. I tell you, there are millions out there that would give anything to have that opportunity that that student athlete has.
Commissioner, in the age of TexAgs and Twitter and the constant demand for insider information, what kind of challenges did that present to you with the realignment saga and bringing other schools into the fold?
Well, it was you know, everything that we do now is obviously viral, you know, and I don't think it makes it more difficult. I do think that all of us have to realize that whatever we say or do is going to be something that people are going to see and read about and talk about. So, you know, it does require us, obviously, to be responsible. You know, during the, there was so much written about expansion. You couldn't keep up with it even if you were trying to read about it. So, but I thought that we were very, I think if any group was quiet, we were the quietest. We kept saying that, you know, we're going to be strategic and thoughtful, and we were, and that we really tried to stay out of all the dialogue. You know, so much of it was speculation. And so we found ourselves really quite comfortable, if that's what you're getting at. And then when we were done, we said what we had done. But we were, you know, there were a lot of issues, of course, surrounding. Some were traditional and some were sort of non-traditional with regard to conference membership. We're sensitive to all of that, but I thought we handled it in a pretty responsible way.
Another hot topic, a story that's out there kind of breaking yesterday and today. It doesn't involve any of the schools we're dealing with, but Mike, I wonder from a big picture, if you've seen the Wisconsin story, and the coach at Wisconsin told one of his players, you know, you can transfer, but I'm going to give you a list of 25 schools that you can't contact. What are your thoughts about that story? It's evolving even as we speak. I don't know if you know much about it.
Are they in my league?
No.
Oh.
So you can say whatever you want. Yeah.
No, maybe I don't want to say anything about it because I don't know enough about it, you know. And I really haven't thought about it, John. You know, I think generally speaking, you know, without talking, I don't know anything about the Wisconsin matter. You know, I think we've seen a couple of these cases recently, and I do think it's time for us to sit down as the NCAA and take a look and see whether or not we want to permit any restrictions on how kids can transfer. But I don't know, I don't want to comment on Wisconsin, I don't know anything about Wisconsin, but we've seen it in a couple of other leagues, and my guess is that you're going to see Dr. Emmert want to examine that rule to see if we're doing the right thing.
Grant, what are your thoughts about, again, not necessarily this specific case, but the idea of kids leaving?
Well, I think that's a part of the totality of what we deal with the NCAA. I mentioned, Teddy Roosevelt saying that if we don't fix this game, he's going to kick it out of the United States, and he loved football. And from that time, we had coaches come together to put together rules to play by. And then we had the NCAA formed in order to make sure that all of the rules and eligibility. You used to could play at A&M and go to Baylor and then go over to some other school, make All-American at all three schools. They weren't regulations or rules. So that has changed with the NCAA. And I think Mike, and we haven't talked about this, would agree with me that what we've got going on in the NCAA right now, although it's cumbersome and painful in many ways, is that finally we've had presidents get together and say, we need to fix some things in here, and we need to do it in as quick manner as we can, taking everything into consideration. And transfer is one of those things. The reason I brought up the background, transfer has been, I think, very, very good in terms of the ability for someone at an upper level to go to a lower level. If they leave that institution eligible, they can go and play immediately. And that's been very, very helpful through the years, because everybody that's recruited at A&M isn't going to be able to play at A&M. Coaches make mistakes, and they're just not going to do it. So for them to have a parachute so that they can continue to get their education and can go and play with eligibility. I don't know anything about the Wisconsin thing, but I can't imagine, unless someone has tried to recruit somebody off my campus, I can't imagine you would limit, anybody from going somewhere. And I'm shooting my mouth off because I don't know really what the circumstances are. But we have good rules in transfer, and they need to be continually looked at for fairness to the student athlete. That's the bottom line. What is fair to them?
Well, I don't know if we've done anything earth-shattering here today, but we did clear that thunderstorm out of here, see? So if nothing else, we got that taken care of. We really appreciate your time. We really appreciate the time of our panelists, Grant Teaff, Tommy Bain, of course, Mike Slive, who had to leave, and the president of Texas A&M, Dr. R. Bowen Loftin. Thank you for coming, and we appreciate it.